Ahoy there, my children of the Force. Welcome to Star Wars Transmissions Weekly Q&A. I'm your boy Dan, and today we've got some really fun, really exciting questions to dive into. So what do you say? Let's get right frickin' to it. Chopper, Sun Tzu, welcome to the chat. Perfect frickin' timing. All right, so for our first question, Smart IX3DT asks, why did Darth Vader ask for Mustafar as the planet for his castle? Love this question because I get to talk about one of my all-time favorite Star Wars comics. So the answer for this question specifically comes from Charles Soule's Darth Vader, Dark Lords of the Sith comic. So Darth Vader 2017 is when that comic run started. Did it end in 2019? I can't remember the year it ended. There's like 25 issues. It is spectacular. It is so damn good. I cannot recommend that comic enough. And so when I saw this question, I was like, oh, yes, I get to talk about Charles Soule's Dark Lords of the Sith, and I am here for it. So the answer for this question, again, comes from Dark Lords of the Sith. And essentially, after Darth Vader found Eth Koth, who was essentially living in hiding as a Force priest, he kills Eth Koth. The Inquisitorious has been doing a great job of eradicating Jedi across the galaxy, and so Sidious wants to give Darth Vader a gift. And what he decides is, I'm going to give Vader Padme Amidala's royal starship as a gift to Darth Vader, because thinking that Darth Vader is going to like that gift. But Darth Vader's like, nah, brah, this isn't enough. I want more. And so in addition to that, Vader wanted a planet of his own that he could basically use as a base of operation and that he could use as a place for him to build a castle, and that the Inquisitorious could then work from, because basically the Inquisitorious were starting to run amok, starting to cause some issues for Sidious since they were based on Coruscant. So Darth Vader requests Mustafar from Darth Sidious. And the comic provides us with one specific reason as to why Darth Vader specifically wanted Mustafar, but I think it's more than just that one reason, which I'm going to explain what the comic dives into, but I think it's more than just what Charles Soule mentions in the comic. So, for starters, Mustafar has an unusually high connection to the dark side of the Force. So there's a high concentration of the dark side that permeates throughout the planet, similar like Dagobah. I'm trying to think of some other darks, Moraband or Korriban, whichever you prefer to name to use. The Sith homeworld, Exegol, right? These are planets that are just steeped in dark side energies, and the dark side permeates throughout these planets. So earlier in the comic, Vader actually kills a Jedi Master named Infila. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Kirak Infila. He kills that Jedi Master. He then takes that Jedi Master's Kyber crystal from his lightsaber. He takes that Kyber crystal then to Mustafar. Sidious guides him to Mustafar and then to this Sith cave on Mustafar, where Darth Vader then bleeds that Kyber crystal, which he then uses for his lightsaber. And so what we learn is that the Sith cave is what's called a locus for the dark side of the Force, and an ancient Sith built and carved a Sith shrine into that cave, essentially to seek the secrets of eternal life. And so the cave was essentially a vergence in the Force. And so that meant that it had an unusually high yet naturally occurring concentration of Force and energy localized around it. So vergences in the Force, they could be people, they could be places. And so for this Sith cave, it was a vergence that was very strong in the dark side. And so Vader actually chose to build his castle right atop that Sith shrine, right atop that Sith cave, as he was impressed by the Sith cave's dark side power and the possibility that came with it. And so once Vader actually tells Sidious, hey, I want Mustafar, bro, he explains to him that when he touched the dark power on Mustafar, he saw deeper into the dark side than ever before, and that Mustafar was the key to hopefully potentially revive Padme and bring her back from the dead. And so that's one of the plot lines of that comic book, is that Vader is doing pretty much what we're seeing transpire in this part of the comic. He's doing what he's doing in hopes of possibly bringing Padme back to life. And so in addition to that, Mustafar, the way I look at it is Mustafar is Vader's birthplace, right? This is where Obi-Wan Kenobi defeated him, giving birth to the Sith Lord that you and I came to know and love, right? And so I think that Mustafar was a constant reminder to Darth Vader, reminding him of his failure in his defeat to Obi-Wan, as well as the death of his wife, which would in turn allow him to feed off of those memories and those emotions in his defeat to Obi-Wan and the death of his wife, strengthening his connection to the Force. There's a common misconception about Darth Vader, at least as far as the current canon goes. Many people believe that, hey, he's lost these limbs, his connection to the dark side is diminished because of the organic body parts that he's lost. And that's not how it is in canon. Darth Vader's connection to the dark side basically exponentially grows because of the turmoil and the trauma that he feels inside. And so I like that not only does Vader want to build a castle on Mustafar because he can sense how powerful the dark side is on that planet, hoping that, hey, maybe I can bring my wife back from the dead, but also that, hey, this is a constant reminder to myself of my failures. This is a constant reminder to myself of what I lost. I need to continue to connect more and more with the dark side so I can continue to grow stronger and stronger in the Force, so that I never have to be in a situation where I could potentially lose to someone else, or maybe lose in a way that's going to be traumatic to me. And we know, obviously, from the Obi-Wan Kenobi series that Vader is going to face Obi-Wan again, and he's going to eventually lose. But at this point in the comic, that hasn't happened yet. So I love that the comic dives specifically into why Vader chose to have Mustafar as the place for him to build his castle. And guys, I've mentioned it so many times on my streams. I cannot recommend that comic enough. If you are not really a big comic fan, or like maybe you want to dabble with comics, but you're not entirely sure where to start, I cannot recommend that comic enough. That is the perfect starting point for Star Wars comics. It is so good from start to finish. That comic is incredible, and I promise you, you will not be disappointed in the slightest bit. All right, so let me quickly go through the chat, see what questions you guys have for me. Let's see, I joined, blah, 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 blah. So this is a good point. So Mantellum Studios, maybe it had resources to build a castle, had lots of minerals. Well, here's the thing, right? The Empire at this point, any resources that they're going to need, even if they don't have it on hand, they're going to find those resources. They're going to find a planet that has the resources that they could utilize, and they're going to make things happen one way or another. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember if... Actually, you know what? Yes, I believe in the comic to build because basically Vader winds up having about 9 or 10 castles built and torn down before he settles on what will become his eventual castle. And I think, if I remember, it's been a minute since I've read that comic. If I remember correctly, Vader and the Empire building that castle was disturbing the Force energies around that area, disrupting the natives that lived on that planet. I'm assuming that part of that was also because of the fact that they're probably using resources around that area to build that castle. And I'm trying to remember. Did they talk about this? Or it might be in another, like a reference book, that his castle is built out of obsidian. I can't remember exactly. Which my guess would be that would come from Mustafar, that the planet is probably rich in obsidian, excuse me. But that's a good point. So Chopper, this is from Darth Vader, Dark Lords of the Sith. You'll see it referred to as, or Darth Vader 2017. Either one of those you'll see it at. My favorite color, tough. I love blue. I love black. You guys, if you watch my live streams, you'll probably notice I typically only wear black t-shirts. I like wear nothing but all black. I love black. It's my favorite color. But then after that, probably like dark blue, like navy blue, purple, and probably pink. Those are probably my favorite colors. All right. Let's move and groove on to our next question, which comes from Luke Skywalker, who asks, who is the first Jedi? So currently in canon, the first Jedi to ever use the Force is known as the Prime Jedi. So we don't know their exact name. We just know that they are what's called the Prime Jedi. And this Jedi was the founder of the Jedi Order. They established the Order on the planet Ahch-To in 25,025 BBY. So a little over 25,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. And you can actually, this is a mosaic of the Prime Jedi, and you can actually see the mosaic right in here. This is in the Jedi Temple where you see Luke speaking to Rey. You get other shots. It's a little tough to see it, but you can see it if you look closely enough. And so you see that mosaic in The Last Jedi, and I believe in the visual dictionary, that's where they kind of expanded more on the Prime Jedi, and you get this image that you see here of the mosaic that you see in the Jedi Temple in Ahch-To. So we don't know a ton about this Jedi, aside from the fact that, hey, they were the first Force user that wound up creating the Jedi Order. Aside from that, we really don't know anything else about them. But my hope is that with the announcement that we're going to be getting the Dawn of the Jedi film from James Mangold, that, hey, this is a great opportunity to dive into the Prime Jedi, to tell us more about this Jedi's life, to get to learn exactly what their name is, what wound up inspiring them to create the Jedi Order, how did they basically sense their connection to the Force, what were people's connection to the Force during that time period. I'm so excited for the James Mangold film, Dawn of the Jedi. That, to me, I feel like opens so many doors for where Lucasfilm could go story-wise. You could, again, just all the stuff I was just saying there, you could then talk about the birth of the Sith. The Sith, we know the Sith broke off from the Jedi at some point. A rogue Jedi wound up basically fracturing from the Jedi Order and created the Sith Order. We could talk about the 100-Year Darkness, which these are all canon stuff, and they were things that were explored in Legends, but these would be great opportunities to talk about that stuff in Dawn of the Jedi. So I am so freaking excited about that film. And if you're unfamiliar, Dawn of the Jedi was one of the 3 films that was announced by Lucasfilm during Star Wars Celebration. Was it last month? Last month already? Holy crap. Time is flying, guys. But yeah, so it was last month. Lucasfilm announced, hey, we're getting 3 new films coming in the future, one of which is going to be Dawn of the Jedi by James Mangold. And when James Mangold was explaining this, he was saying that one of the things that inspired him for that film was biblical stories. And so getting to see a Star Wars story told in that point of view, or that lens, and diving into the Prime Jedi and diving into the founding of the Jedi Order, oh, that is so freaking awesome. That is something I am really, really excited for, something I'm really excited about, and something I think that a lot of fans would be eager to learn about. So that's, at this point, that's all we really know. There's not much else to discuss with the Prime Jedi, but I think we're going to be getting more information about that specific Jedi in the very near future, which I'm very excited about. All right, let's move and groove, my friends, to our next question. So this one comes from Daniela Moreau, 4166, who asks, who were the first intelligent beings in Star Wars? So that would most likely be the wills. We don't know much about the wills or what they look like at this point. There's no images of the wills at this point, at least as far as I spent a good amount of time trying to find images. I couldn't find any images of the wills, so we don't know what they look like. We don't know a ton, but what we do know is that the wills were a community of beings who were notable and wrote the Journal of the Wills, which was a document that was basically recording important events throughout galactic history in the Star Wars universe. And I love, from a certain point of view, the canon anthology novel. And I believe, I know in the first one, from a certain point of view for New Hope, that the final short story in that book is told from the perspective of a will. I believe the final story of From a Certain Point of View, The Empire Strikes Back, is also same sort of thing, told from the point of view of a will. I'm not 100% sure on that from The Empire Strikes Back from a certain point of view, but definitely from the first point, from a certain point of view. And so one of the other things that we do know about the wills is that there were shaman among them, one of which was responsible for teaching Qui-Gon Jinn basically to how he could manifest himself, his consciousness after dying, basically how to become a Force ghost. Qui-Gon learned that from a shaman of the wills. And so that's kind of all we really know about them currently in canon. But if we dive into George Lucas's plan for the wills and what he kind of envisioned, for Lucas, he envisioned the wills essentially as these like godlike beings. So think of them almost like Force gods within the Star Wars galaxy. And this is where it gets crazy. And I remember when this was announced, this is probably like a decade at this point when it was announced. People were losing their minds about it, but he envisioned them to be microscopic, single-celled life forms who maintained a symbiotic relationship with midi-chlorians that offered destinies to people. So that's how we hear in Star Wars, like, hey, Anakin, you're destined to do this, or hey, Obi-Wan, you're destined to do this. Basically, it's the wills and their symbiotic relationship with the Force that are basically willing those destinies, for lack of a better term. But that's kind of all we really know about the wills at this point. But yeah, my thought would be those would be considered the first intelligent beings within the Star Wars galaxy. And who knows when they were created, how they were created. I have to imagine they probably have something to do with the wellspring of the Force, which we see in season 6 of the Clone Wars, which is a good segue. A lot of people confuse the wills for the 5 priestesses that we see in season 6 of the Clone Wars. When I was trying to find images for the wills, I can't tell you how many things I saw, how many YouTube videos I saw of people claiming that the Force priestesses in season 6 of the Clone Wars are wills, and that is not the case at all. And I will say, for a long time, I actually thought that the 5 priestesses that we see in season 6 of the Clone Wars, I thought that they were the wills, but they're not. So during a Q&A that Dave Filoni did back in 2014, he explained that those Force priestesses may be one being who became 5 over a very long period of time, saying it's one ancient being separated over a time that for our perception to be able to see her, she is many different iconic things presented to us. But she died a long, long time ago. She is conscious in the Force, and she has a limited ability to manifest. So yeah, I wanted to clarify that because, like I said, for a while I thought that the Force priestesses were the wills, and I see that a bunch, that people assume that these 5 individuals or these 5 beings are wills, and they're not. But this is a great question. I would love to learn more about the wills. My guess is once From a Certain Point of View, Return of the Jedi comes out, which I think it's coming out in October. Or excuse me, not October, August. I believe it's coming out in August. I'm imagining we're going to get another short story from the Will's point of view. And I really like them. I think the first one, From a Certain Point of View, is written by Kevin Scott. and it's kind of like it's kind of funny. And the second one was enjoyable as well. I really enjoy From a Certain Point of View, both of them. The one short story in From a Certain Point of View about Yoda. There's another one about Obi-Wan. Oh my God, they are incredible. They are so freaking good. In the From a Certain Point of View, from The Empire Strikes Back, we get an excellent short story about the scene where Sidious says to Vader, I felt a disturbance in the Force. Have you felt it? Whatever that quote is. We get a really great story that dives into that. Can't recommend those books enough. They're excellent. All right. So let's see what questions we got quickly in the chat before we move and groove. Who is Anakin's father? So at this point, Anakin was basically created by the Force. So think of it like in Christian mythology or the Christian religion, the Immaculate Conception of Jesus Christ. It's the same sort of kind of like concept. The Force basically willed this being into existence to combat the growing dark side that was starting to take over the galaxy because of Darth Sidious and Darth Plagueis. So Anakin was born of the Force. There's another misconception that I see a lot is that, Darth Sidious is Anakin's father, Darth Plagueis is Anakin's father. And that wasn't even the case in Legends. In Legends, in James Luceno's... Is it James Luceno or Drew Karpyshyn? I can't remember who wrote Darth Plagueis off the top of my head right now. But in the Darth Plagueis novel, what's explained is that Darth Sidious and Darth Plagueis, they were kind of doing all this weird like Sith alchemy, I guess, to try to put as much dark side energy throughout the galaxy to combat the light side of the Force. And because of that, Plagueis thought that the Force was fighting back and gave birth to Anakin Skywalker. So even in Darth Plagueis, it's not said that Darth Sidious or Plagueis were Anakin's father. So in canon, that's definitely not the case. It's the Force willed Anakin to be born as a way to combat the growing dark side. And then once Anakin fell to the dark side, then that we see the Force willing Luke and Leia to be born, right? We got two powerful Darksiders in Darth Sidious and Darth Vader that are now rising to power in the galaxy. And it's not a coincidence that we have these two beings in Luke and Leia being born right at the exact same time. Yes, I'll have to double check. For whatever reason, I'm having a brain fart right now. I can't remember if it's Drew Karpyshyn or James Luceno. I'm like 99% sure it is James Luceno and I believe it was Drew Karpyshyn that wrote the Darth Bane novels, but I'm having a brain fart right now. So I'm going to say I think that you're right, Chopper, but I am not 100% sure right now. All right, speaking of our boy Palpatine, a great segue. Megan Craft 7 asks, why did Palpatine believe he could seduce Luke like he did Anakin? So I think it boils down to a couple of things with Sidious. The main reason, my thought, is that Sidious believed that he could seduce Anakin was Luke was because, hey, like father, like son, right? Going back to what I was just saying before about, hey, we've got these powerful two Darksiders rising to power at the exact same time. We've got these two young, powerful, eventually powerful Force users, especially Luke, that are being born at the same time, right? Star Wars is told in kind of like this poetry sort of a way, this rhyming sort of a way. I shouldn't say poetry, kind of like rhyming sort of way. So, right, hey, the father falls, the son should also fall as well. So in Sidious's mind, he's thinking, hey, I was able to seduce Vader. I was able to seduce Anakin to the dark side. I can easily seduce his son. And that to me tracks with Sidious, right? He is very confident in himself and over confident in himself. And we hear Luke tell Darth Sidious in Return of the Jedi in the throne room saying, hey, your overconfidence is your weakness. And Luke is not wrong. Darth Sidious does not believe that he can fail, or if he thinks that, hey, there's a possibility I may fail, he's got a backup plan. So in Sidious's mind, he's thinking, hey, you're going to fall to the dark side, and if you don't, Vader and I are going to kill you. You can't redeem Anakin. You're not going to bring him back to the light side. So one way or another, I'm going to get what I want. Either Vader's still going to be my apprentice, and he's going to continue to be my servant, or Vader's going to die because Luke is going to kill him, and I've got a younger and potentially even more powerful apprentice to use as my servant. And we know obviously that doesn't happen. So I think it's two things. I think it's Sidious saying to himself, hey, like father, like son, I was able to seduce Anakin to become a Sith. I should be able to seduce his son. One of the critiques I will say that I do have about the original trilogy that I don't see a lot of people mention is that it's not as clear cut that Luke is supposed to be kind of like teetering on the dark side with the dark side. Like we sort of get a sense, and once I got older, I understood it. But when I was younger, I did not understand like, oh, he's supposed to be kind of like struggling with falling to the dark side. It wasn't until like I was maybe in my late teens, early 20s, I started to realize like, oh yeah, our boy's dressed in all black. He's using force techniques that are more associated with these evildoers that we've seen in the film so far. But if you're not quick to that uptake, it's not as clear cut that Luke is struggling with the dark side. And I hope that that's something that is explored more in the comics. There is some trying to think, some stuff that we've gotten in comics. There hasn't been a ton of Luke Skywalker books, so I think it'd be more like comic stuff that we would see. There's a Star Wars annual where we see Luke wielding a lightsaber from a Sith Lord, an ancient Sith Lord, and he's struggling with the dark side there. I think the main Star Wars comic run right now, once Lucasfilm was acquired by Disney, the main Star Wars comic series started in 2015 to 2019, I believe. It was either 2015 to 2019 or 2016 to 2019. And now and that took place between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. The current main comic, Star Wars comic, is being written by Charles Soule, and that's taking place between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And I'm wondering if we may see Charles Soule talk a little bit about Luke struggling with the dark side more. Love the original trilogy, but that's one thing I will say that I think George Lucas didn't do the best job of is kind of explaining Luke's struggle with the dark side. But I think that could be easily explained in a comic or even a book, because we do get some hints in Return of the Jedi. All right, let's see what you guys got for questions. So this is another good one. Did Obi-Wan forgive Anakin? Yeah, I would like to think so. I'm trying to think if there's been any specific releases that I can think of off the top of my head where Obi-Wan says that he forgives Anakin. I mean, my thought would have to be yes, right? Because we see the two Force ghosts at the end of Return of the Jedi. So I would have to think that at some point Obi-Wan forgave Anakin for what he did. You know, say what you want about the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. I cannot watch the scene where I'm thinking about it right now, and I'm like starting to get a little teary-eyed. I cannot watch the finale of that series and see Ewan McGregor portraying Obi-Wan basically apologizing to Anakin. I'm sorry for everything that I've done. I'm sorry for how bad I failed you. incredible. I'm like straight up like fighting back tears right now, guys, because that scene is just incredible. It is so amazing. Everything about that moment is incredible. So I would like to think that Obi-Wan, once Anakin was redeemed and he saved his son, that Obi-Wan forgave Anakin for what he did. I would like to think so. You know, it might not be right away, might not be right in that moment at the end of Return of the Jedi, but that'd be dope if we could get some sort of scene of those two as Force ghosts training Luke. The canon novel Shadow of the Sith, one of my absolute favorite Star Wars novels, period. Legends or canon. It's incredible. We get a moment. I don't know if I always am like hesitant to spoil because the book is so incredible and I can't recommend it enough. But I'm going to spoil something from that book. So if you don't want to hear this, dip out now. In that book, we get a moment where Force Ghost Anakin appears and he saves Luke. It is fucking incredible. It's so good. I would love if we get more moments of Luke post Return of the Jedi where we get to see both Anakin and Obi-Wan training him. That would be incredible. And in the novel Shadow of the Sith, Anakin can manifest himself as a Force ghost, but not that well. He kind of like struggles to appear to Luke. But man, how incredible would it be to get scenes of Anakin training Luke and Obi-Wan training Luke and those two training Luke together at the same time? Like, oh my God, that would be incredible. I would be like, Lucasfilm, you could take my money right now. I would be all about that. Like, yes, freaking please. But to answer that question, I would like to think that Obi-Wan would at some point forgive Anakin for what he did. Right? I would hope so. Because I think definitely Obi-Wan, I know Obi-Wan feels guilty for Anakin and feels responsible for Anakin's fall in becoming a Sith Lord. So I do think that at some point, Force Ghost Obi-Wan would forgive Luke. In my head canon, I'm saying Force Ghost Obi-Wan is gonna forgive Force Ghost Anakin. All right. So next question. This is a little bit of a long one. So Douglas Baker 4562 asks, in episode 2, we see Count Dooku clearly taking the Death Star plans for safekeeping. What did Dooku think was going on with those plans? What did the rest of the Separatist leadership think? And how much did any of them actually know about the Death Star? This is an excellent question because as far as I could tell, I don't think this has been answered at all in canon. So in Attack of the Clones, right, we see the Republic has invaded Geonosis with their brand new clone army. The Separatists are fighting the Republic forces, and we could see Poggle the Lesser. He pulls up the Death Star plans, and he and Dooku are talking, and then we see Poggle the Lesser give Count Dooku the plans for the Death Star. And as far as I can tell, there isn't anything specifically in canon that answers Douglas's question. During the scene where Poggle the Lesser gives Count Dooku the Death Star plans, you can actually see in the background, there's a bunch of Separatist leadership in the background talking amongst themselves, probably strategizing, probably trying to figure out, hey, how can we beat back these Republic forces? I don't think Poggle the Lesser and Count Dooku would be pleased, or let me rephrase it. I don't think Count Dooku would be pleased with Poggle the Lesser pulling up these Death Star plans if the Separatist leadership were not aware as to what the Geonosians were doing and what was going on, right? So my thought is that Dooku obviously is aware of what was going on with the Death Star, right? How could he not? Dooku had to be aware, or I will say probably was aware of the Death Star being constructed, not just as as a tool for Darth Sidious to control the galaxy, right? Because he understood what Darth Sidious's plans were. He knew Sidious was once Count Dooku became Sidious's apprentice, he was a Dark Lord of the Sith. He understood then at that point the Sith Grand Plan and what that plan entailed, toppling the Republic and destroying the Jedi Order. So Dooku 100% knew what Sidious was up to, and because of that, my thought is, hey, he probably knew what the Death Star was eventually going to be used for and what Sidious was planning to do with it. If he didn't, let's be honest, Dooku is he's a pretty smart guy. He's pretty with it. I think that even if I find it unlikely, but if he did not know what Sidious had planned, I think he would be able to put the pieces together because, as I mentioned, once he became Sidious's apprentice, he's a Dark Lord of the Sith. He's going to be told, here's the Sith Grand Plan. Here is what we've been doing for 1,000 years behind the scene since the days of Darth Bane. So again, even if Sidious did not tell Count Dooku, I think that Dooku would have been smart enough to figure it out that, hey, this is what the Death Star is actually going to be used for. So I think my thought is Dooku knew. If he didn't, he would have been able to piece it together. As for the Separatist leaders, obviously they knew the Death Star was going to be constructed because, again, you could see Poggle the Lesser clearly knows he's got the Geonosians working on building the Death Star. You could see all of the Separatist leaders in this war room. They probably are aware of the Death Star's construction. And my thought is they were probably told that, hey, we're going to build this weapon as a way to destroy the Republic, to beat the Republic, not destroy the Republic, to beat the Republic so that the Separatists, the CIS, could have our own autonomy. The Confederacy of Independent Systems will be able to defeat the Republic, and then we'll be able to be our own governing entity. That's my thought, is that that's what Dooku probably told these Separatist leaders, that, hey, this is what this weapon, this battle station is going to be used for, right? Because again, Dooku's not stupid. Even if he was not told specifically by Sidious what it was used for, I think Dooku understands, and hey, the less these Separatist leaders know, the better. And I also think that there's no way Darth Sidious would want them to know what the Death Star was going to be used for. Think about what we've seen so far in canon, the lengths that Darth Sidious and the Empire goes to hide the construction of the Death Star from the general populace throughout the galaxy. There's no way Sidious would want the Separatist leaders to know what the Death Star was actually going to be used for. But since they probably had to be aware of the construction just because of how massive that battle station was going to be, the fact that the Geonosians and the entire population basically were being used to construct the Death Star, I think the Separatist leaders had to be made aware of the weapon, but they were probably just told that, hey, this is going to be used to defeat the Republic so that we could become our own governing entity in the galaxy. That's my thought. All right. Let's see what we got in the chat. Who did Anakin fly with other than Kenobi, and what's her name? So Anakin, we know he flies with, he's flown with Padme. He's flown with Ahsoka. I don't know. I can't think of off the top of my head who else Anakin has flown with. There's probably other Jedi that I can't think of off the top of my head. Definitely, there's got to be some more that I'm not thinking about. I can't think of right now from the Clone Wars. All right, so on to our last question. I was so pumped to get this question because, guys, you best believe your boy has thought about this. What the hell would my Sith name be? You know my nerd ass has thought about this, sadly, at length. I have thought about this way too much, and your boy's got some options, got some choices. So I've got a couple that I like and I think are pretty fun. So I'm going to share this image. I've mentioned this before. This is a sketch that I had made for the channel. This is one of my cosplay outfits that I rock. And I rock it as either a Sith Lord Or as a Jedi, hey, if I'm feeling today I want to be a Sith Lord, I'm going to change my lightsaber color to be red. Or if, hey, I want to be a Jedi today, I'm changing my lightsaber usually to purple. But there was this crust punk band from Long Island in the early to mid 2000s. Their name was Disnile. Loved the band at the time, thought their music was dope, but I really, really liked their name. I thought their name was so sick. And I thought to myself, yo, that would be an excellent Sith name. And so ever since then, whenever I play a video game and I have to create a name for a character, Disnile is usually the name that I use. So Star Wars: The Old Republic, I played that game for like close to a decade. One of my main tunes that I rocked in SWTOR was a Jedi Sentinel named Disnile. Wasn't a Sith Lord. It was a Jedi named Disnile. But I love how Darth Disnile sounds. It just sounds so awesome to me. I love that it sounds kind of scary and foreboding. To me, it just seems like an excellent Sith name. The only problem with that name is it sounds very similar to Nihilus. And it also is basically evokes the Nihil from the High Republic. But here's this, again, I've spent way too much time thinking about this, guys. In my mind, I'm like, okay, Darth Disnile is a Sith Lord, especially once we got the High Republic. My mind went right to, okay, Darth Disnile is going to be the Sith Lord that is operating during the time of the High Republic. He's the one operating behind the scenes, controlling the Nihil, and Darth Disnile worships Darth Nihilus, and that's why his name is Disnile, and that's why the Nihil are named the Nihil. Again, I have thought about this way too much. I have spent way too much time thinking about this, but Lucasfilm, if anyone from Lucasfilm sees this, I would gladly give you guys that story. All I ask in return is just some Star Wars merch, just some toys, some t-shirts. That's all I want from Lucasfilm from that. You guys can have that for free. I think that's a pretty fair trade. The other name that I really like and would sadly probably be the one that I would pick just because I love Darth Disnile more, but because of how similar it sounds to Nihilus and the Nihil, I probably wouldn't choose Darth Disnile. So the one that I would most likely go with if I had to choose just one name, Darth Abraxas. Love how it sounds, Abraxas. I can't remember exactly. I don't think it's a demon. The name comes from like some mythology. I can't remember exactly, but it's such a sick sounding name. Darth Abraxas just sounds so malevolent. Sounds like a very powerful Sith Lord. It sounds frightening. It's perfect. I think that is such an excellent name. And as far as I'm aware, I don't think there are any Sith in the Old Republic in Legends named Darth Abraxas. So I'm like, yo, that would be my Sith name, Darth Abraxas. If, again, Nihil, the Nihil weren't a thing in the High Republic, if Darth Nihilus wasn't a thing, I'd be like, yo, Darth Disnile. I'm trying to remember when KOTOR 2 came out. Was it before? I know the first KOTOR came out around like the early 2000s. So I was still in high school when it came out, and I was in high school in the early 2000s. And that's when the band Disnile, when I first heard them, I was in high school. And I can't remember how old I was when KOTOR 2 came out or when it came out. But anyway, that's a conversation for another time. That's me telling you guys how freaking old my ass is. So yeah, Darth Abraxas would probably be the Sith name that I would choose. But I want to know what you guys would choose. What would your Sith name be? Let me know down in the comments. So I've spent a ton of time coming up with my Sith name. Guys, I can't even tell you how long I have spent trying to turn my actual name, my first and last name, into like Jedi names or Star Wars character names, trying to just like move around the letters of my name to create names that would sound like they belong in the Star Wars galaxy. I have like a notebook somewhere that I would just write down my name and try to rearrange the letters of my name to create a Star Wars sounding name. I am a nerd to like the umpth degree, guys. Again, I've spent way too much time on this. So I want to know, what would your Sith Lord name be? What would your Sith name be? What would if you were a character, a non-Sith character in Star Wars, what would your name be? Whether it's a Jedi, bounty hunter, smuggler, what would your name be? That was one of the things that I really liked doing in SWTOR. I had a bunch of characters that I would use. I would rock Jedi Sentinel. Oh, what is the healers called? I'm drawing a blank on what the healing class of the Jedi were called. I had a Jedi healer. I had a smuggler or bounty hunter. I can't remember what they were. Smuggler, bounty hunter, one. Oh no, gunslinger. That's what it was. I loved my gunslinger. His name was Xanteros. I had a Sith sorcerer, a Sith juggernaut. I'm trying to remember their names. And I would not use, like, you could SWTOR has a feature where it basically just like randomly picks a name for you. I refuse to use that. I created names for every single one of my characters, and I tried to make them as like Star Wars-y as I possibly could. And again, I spent way too much time thinking about it. But yeah, that's the stuff I love about Star Wars. Being a nerd, spending way too much time on nerdy shit. But guys, that is all the time we got for today's Q&A. This was a super fun one. I freaking love doing the Q&A. I can't tell you guys how excited I get each week to do the Q&A. I look forward to doing the Q&A every single time I do it. It's always a shit ton of fun. It's always super fun to see your questions, and I can't answer all the questions that I get, so I try to, as best as I can, keep track of ones that I'm like, oh, this is going to be a good question for next time. So if you did not see your question answered, keep a lookout for future Q&As, because like I said, I definitely have a queue of questions that I'm keeping in my back pocket or planning to answer in either the next Q&A or in future Q&As. But now is a good time, you frickin' knuckleheads. Like this video, subscribe to Star Wars Transmissions. I am still in the midst of playing Jedi Survivor. Although it bums me out, this is the only video game that does this to me. It keeps freaking crashing on me, and it seems like that is a recurring issue for people rocking Star Wars Survivor, which is a bummer. But I'm in the midst of playing the story for Jedi Survivor, and I've been doing streams. I've usually been doing like 2 or 3 a week where I'll stream for at least like an hour and a half. I've done a couple where I've streamed for like 2 hours, 3 hours. Just depending upon my schedule, I may do them. I may do a stream either Thursday or Friday this week of rocking some Jedi Survivor. So keep a lookout for that. Got shorts that we drop on the reg. Follow Star Wars Transmissions on TikTok. If you have TikTok, you follow us at SW Transmissions. So with that said, my friends, I'm going to go hopefully turn on the Yankees. I'm hoping my boys are whooping the Blue Jays. I don't know if they are winning, but I'm hoping they're crushing the freaking Blue Jays. They won yesterday, so I want to keep that train rolling for them. So I'm going to watch some Yankees, then probably play a little Halo. But I'm going to go enjoy the rest of my evening. You do the same. May the Force be with you, and stay nerdy.